Welcome back to Neurodivergent Relationships with Dr. Kathy Marshak. I'm your host, Dr. Kathy, and this is where we explore the unique dynamics of neurodivergent relationships. Today we're talking about something that's at the heart of so many of these relationships, how humor, logic, and even avoidance can mask true emotions. Today's podcast is entitled Beyond the Words, How Conversational Aspergian Unlocks Empathy. So, have you ever had someone laugh at the worst possible moment, or maybe you shared something personal only to get a debate instead of support? If you've ever been confused by these reactions from a neurodiverse loved one, you're not alone. If you've been frustrated by an autistic loved one's reaction, whether they laugh at the wrong moment, play devil's advocate when you just want to be heard, or shut down instead of engaging, this episode is for you. I'll start with a personal story, one that took me years to understand. It's about my mother. When I finished my master's degree in social work, I landed my first job as a Child Protective Services social worker for the state of Oregon. If you know anything about CPS, you know that it's not an easy job, especially for a young social worker. The work was stressful, heartbreaking, and frankly underpaid. I lasted 5 years, but I learned a lot that helped me later as a therapist and led me decades later to develop Conversational Aspergian. It was an underpinning for this concept. Come to think of it, my job as a CPS social worker strengthened my empathy, and so can learning Conversational Aspergian. When I told my mother about my new job, she laughed and said, "Oh, my daughter has a nice, cushy government job." And then she continued laughing. Now, if you just cringed, so did I. Back then, I didn't have the skills to understand her. I just didn't get why she would laugh at something so important. I wanted my mother to say, "I'm proud of you," or "Wow, what a tough job. How do you do it?" Instead, I got laughter and a comment that felt dismissive. At the time, I was hurt, but years later, I realized something surprising. She actually was proud of me. She just had a completely different way of showing it. My mother was on the autism spectrum. The answer lies in her context blindness, and understanding this changed the way I see communication with my neurodiverse loved ones and others. So my mother grew up in the Great Depression. She had to work to afford high school. She had to work full time so that she could afford to go to high school. She had to pay for her own room and board as a teenager. To her, a government job with benefits was a dream come true. She wasn't dismissing my hard work. She just focused on the one detail that made sense to her: job security. This is a classic example of context blindness. Neurodiverse individuals often pay attention to the details they can grasp, not necessarily the ones that feel most important to others. She wasn't ignoring the importance of my job or the stress I was under. She just wasn't considering it at all. So this kind of disconnect happens in many neurodivergent relationships. Take this example. A man once asked me, "Why do I always play devil's advocate when my girlfriend tells me about her tough day?" He's on the autism spectrum. He says, "Why do I always play devil's advocate?" Well, he didn't realize it, but this was his version of masking. Her stress made him stressed. Instead of feeling with her, he got transactional, offering alternative perspectives, suggesting other ways to think about the problem, but not really listening to her. The problem? She didn't want solutions. She wanted to be heard, understood. And he was unaware that he was actually covering his own feelings of distress about her distress by shifting into logic mode. Here's another example of anger as masking. Another man, autistic, got so frustrated with his mother for making silly conversation at a holiday meal that he snapped at her. He told her to be quiet and left early from the holiday, saying, "I just couldn't take it anymore." Now, on the surface, this looks like rudeness, maybe even kind of cruelty to his mother. But when we dug deeper, I found out something he hadn't considered. His mother has Alzheimer's. And deep down, he couldn't stand thinking about losing her. The holiday dinner wasn't the real issue. His grief was. Now here's the real interesting part. When you learn to speak conversational Aspergian, to step into the world of your autistic loved one, you actually expand your own empathic skills. Neurodiverse people aren't lacking emotions, they just process them differently. Instead of assuming their reaction is callous, ask yourself, this is a question I had to learn to ask myself, what is the most unlikely feeling they might really be having? Because often it's something deeply human, fear, stress, love, pride, but it's masked by humor, logic, or avoidance. In my mother's case, she was proud of me and she was relieved that I had a nice, cushy government job. So here's my challenge for you. The next time you feel frustrated by a neurodiverse loved one's reaction, pause and ask yourself, what might their frame of reference be? What details are they focused on that I'm missing? And most importantly, what is the most unlikely feeling that they might really be having? Because when you start seeing the emotions beneath the surface, you don't just decode their behavior, but you become a more empathic communicator yourself. If this episode resonated with you, let's keep the conversation going. I host a private podcast after party for members of my group. It's a confidential space where members can join live or listen to the recording later. If you're interested in becoming a member, check the link in the description on this page, this podcast page, or you can also just go to one of my websites and look on the calendar. And as always, keep learning, keep listening, and keep showing up with radiant empathy. See you next time.